All right, next we have global financial leader AXA, talking about machine learning models for underwriting and pricing around the world. We're going to have Newcombe from Business Solutions, strategic analyst from AXA XL, as well as Rob Moss, global head of pricing, marine and crisis management at AXA XL. Take it away, guys.
Hi, how you doing? Assuming everyone can hear me here. Thank you for joining. You kicked us off well in terms of who we are and what we do. I think for perhaps the purpose of this, given we've got a lot of marketers on, it might be best to compare AXA as a manufacturer. People don't always necessarily think of insurance that way, but myself and Rob kind of work on the factory floor versus the showroom. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we've attempted to take some of the applications, techniques, approaches that you might more often see in kind of frontline marketing and pull it deeper into the operation. Rob?
Yeah. So I mean, in general, I think it's an interesting analogy. I'm very much in the numbers, working on pricing. So this is a new foray for me into the marketing side of the world. So I will try my best, but bear with me if I say anything too stupid. We'll try and talk some interesting stuff here. So we'll move on. Okay.
So yes, we are talking marine cargo insurance, or as we often call it, the ballad of stuff. Whatever might be in your mind when you think about marine cargo and the things that might go wrong that concern us on a day-to-day basis, this might be top of mind. Rob?
Yeah, so, I think hopefully everyone knows what insurance is, and we all buy house insurance and etc. Cargo insurance, we can and do insure pretty much anything that moves, and also insure that stuff while it's moving and sitting still. So we'll go into a little bit more detail on the next slide, but like pretty much anything you can think about being delivered to your house has been through a whole chain of shipments and deliveries, and that's what we're talking about insuring here.
Yeah, so you've got your types of cargo, the stuff that might be sitting in an intermodal container, can move from ship to train to truck. You've got anything that can go into that container, toys, shoes, furnitures, etc. Some are more hazardous than others. You can imagine there's a point of concern for us right there in terms of knowing what's in the container. You've got the bulk commodities. So these are the things you see in the big tankers, not in the containers, dry and bulk, the oils and the natural gases of the world that also keep us up at night. You've got refrigerated cargo, so things about cold chain, which you can imagine is top of mind as it relates to our pending vaccines. And then you also have perishable cargo that isn't always in refrigerated containers. So again, it's a worry game on a lot of this. How it moves, you've got your kind of primary conveyances, ship, barge, airplane, and mail, but then everything between those. You've got rail, truck, barge, lighter, delivery truck, camel. As Rob said, basically anything. If it's a thing and you can move it, we're thinking about how to protect that it arrives safely and soundly. So from a modeling perspective, the amount of data available is almost overwhelming. Rob?
Yeah, yeah, I think when we introduce myself, I'm the head of marine pricing. So I think things people talk about cargo and they often think stuff on a boat, right? And some of the stuff Newcombe has talked about here takes us away from that. But, just to give some background, if we have a loss in our cargo portfolio, that could come from boats crashing. It can come from cars crashing, lorries crashing, planes crashing, things rusting, things rotting, things thawing, things growing moldy, having animals in them is a classic. So we had a cheese loss a while ago where we had mice living in the cheese. This is interesting stuff we deal with. Warehouse fires, hurricanes, port explosions, which obviously we've seen one recently, you know, like we have a lot of stuff sat in ports. Oil fires and theft. I mean, this is one that blew my mind personally when someone said to me the conveyance type was pipes. And I just could not get my head around this, right? But we are insuring the oil as it moves through pipes. If it moves, we will insure it. So when we say there is so much data, I think that the real statement is there is potentially so much data, but this is a slightly antiquated world we live in, right? So data can be extremely sparse in terms of the collection and in terms of the handoff to us as insurers. Aggregations are real problems, right? It's a really tricky thing to aggregate our portfolio. So when we have a port explosion like in Beirut, how have we tracked what we are insuring and what is sat on that port at this time? Almost impossible, right? To be truly honest, knowing where anything is at any one time that we are insuring is almost impossible in itself. So the aggregation piece is, you can imagine, is a challenge. And then the other thing, this market has been incredibly cheap for such a long time. There is a real oversupply of insurance capacity. So getting anyone to make that data better and give it to us is quite a difficult thing. Marine in itself and cargo is one of the oldest insurance lines in the world, right? Like this stuff has been going since ships first set sail. And quite often it feels like it's still that antiquated. I'll pass back to Newcombe.
Yeah, no, and as Rob had mentioned, it's moving around and sometimes it's not, and that causes some problems. And hopefully we've got a working video here. I'll just just point out everyone is okay in this video. Rob, anything to say about that particular claim?
Well, I mean, I guess this is like the problem we have within insurance in general, right? So there is, as you can tell from the video, there was a whole load of stuff that got damaged there. So when we're writing cargo, right, we're not only trying to understand what is it we're moving and what are the risk factors associated with those things that we are moving or storing. There's also the risk factors associated kind of external to the product, right? So if we're doing iron ore versus cheese, it's quite obvious that cheese is much easier to damage than iron ore. But then it's also about where are you storing it, right? We don't necessarily know those things. So in that particular video, you can see it didn't take an awful lot to destroy millions of dollars worth of product. We will probably not have that level of information, right, on the shelving units used or what the width between shelving units are. So we are trying to make very complex financial decisions with very limited data is where I would put it.
So problem one, if you're doing data science, is data, and we've got some particulars. Problem two gets more into this idea of us being a factory. So the way marine insurance kind of works is a broker will come to us with their client. We do sell primarily through brokers, and they'll give us a limited amount of data through a submission. And Rob's team and the underwriting teams will do their magic. Increasingly, that magic is aided by predictive analytics, actuarial science, and statistical models. As that gets more complex, that's a challenge. And then you basically quote back to the broker and see if there's a transaction to be had. You're always fighting against the black box, because the more precise you want to make our kind of pricing and our product and terms and conditions, the more complex the matiations and the math behind it, which makes it potentially less user-friendly to both explain to our own internal underwriters, but also the broker and the client. So it's always a trade-off. And then you can imagine trying to do this tens of thousands of times a year in dozens of offices all around the world, conducted by hundreds of professionals in dozens of languages. Usually there's a deadline to get back with that quote. These are often always typically done by hand and almost bespoke, and facing other insurance manufacturers with the same information. So it's not like we're running an e-commerce store here. Rob?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just double down on that, right? Like, each one of these submissions is kind of handled by a different broker. Each broker has a different way of presenting their data, combining data, giving it to us, so there are unique challenges to not only gathering the data, but using the data. There's been lots of attempts to make inroads using things like blockchain. They haven't got that far yet, so the data is still pretty heterogeneous, mostly in spreadsheets, sometimes, to add, discussed even in PDFs. This is not a clean data kind of setup, I would say.
Yeah, a lot of moving parts. So then on top of that and everything we talked about, what other fun things do we have to think about? Near constant M&A in our industry for a whole host of business reasons. We've got silos, which also get moved around and make things fun in the presence of constant M&A. And the data quality and reliability is default questionable. So on top of weird and kind of divergent data sets, lots of moving parts, you have all of this organizational challenges, leaving you very often wondering, which way is up. Rob?
Yeah, I think we're running out of time, so I think we should just move on.
All right, so I'm going to yada yada through what we actually did to solve it, but the good news is we are solving it. We've got a few atoms. We move fast and we never stop. So we're trying to get a flywheel going. We constantly ask for help, and we constantly give help to try to break through some of those silos and the not my job-isms that can happen as things move around organizationally. And everything we do, we try to simplify, always. Rob, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth pointing out that we are quite often dealing with an audience that isn't necessarily the most technical audience as well. So in terms of simplification and making things easy to understand, it is absolutely paramount to us. And I know failing fast is one of those things that gets thrown around a lot, especially in insurance with InsurTech. But in terms of doing these projects with the underwriters we have, it is absolutely key that we move these things on quickly. And if they're not working, we change them up and move again.
Great. So an output and an insight, if you can look at this chart moving left to right, you basically have a buildup of our business where once we've segmented it using our models, we can see that we've got a bit of a problem as we move from our most attractive segments to our least attractives, where we basically reach and pass our point of optimal predicted profitability as we add that last hunk of business moving from segment 3 into segment 4. So this creates an opportunity, right? With the insights of our model, with the simplification of this, we can move into a set of actions, both in pricing and underwriting, where we can actually make decisions segment by segment to avoid this loss of optimal profitability, giving up a little bit of revenue in the actions, but increasing our profitability substantially. Rob?
Yeah, and I guess the interesting thing is because we are dealing in a kind of fairly contained world with a number of people who control the business, the key really is let's not lose all of our business in the tiers 1 to 3 in order to fix tier 4, right? That's the real key for us. So this kind of approach allows us to target very simply those bits that we want to fix, but also keeping an eye on the bits that we don't necessarily want to fix and we do not want to lose.
Great. And I think we're right at time. Thank you so much for sticking us through, and apologies if we got a little bit into the weeds on marine.
Thank you, guys.